No, technology. It can let you down at the best of times. Hey, listen, great to be here with you. What a great setup you did tonight for us, the food, everything, and to see so many people here. It's a pleasure to be with you. And just a correction, first of all, one of my favourite nephews, one of them. Josh is another one. There's a few around the place here. Darren is not my grandson. He happens to be my son. I'm pretty certain that was a joke. Otherwise, you should have gone to Specsavers. No, it is good to be here. This is a fabulous subject. I really like talking about this subject because it's important. And the reason why it's important is because we live in an age where almost every school now, as the curriculum teaches evolution as being a fact. It's not a fact, it's a theory. It's always been called the theory of evolution. And a theory is an unproven teaching. But unfortunately, they've taken the word theory out of a lot of the curriculum and they just teach it as if it's a scientific fact. And the reality is 50% of the scientists on this earth, some of them don't really necessarily believe in God, but 50% of that element don't believe in evolution. All right, so it's always the other 50% that get their hearsay, and so they will push this unproven theory across to us. And I think it's important we understand that there is a divine creator behind everything that we see in this world as far as the natural world and including our own physical being. I like this little comment here. Where did evolution start? Don't you walk away from me while I'm talking to you. So it just sort of encapsulates the absurdity of evolution. And, we can say, could evolution be true, or is there another explanation? So what we're going to...
I need to interrupt.
Oh.
Okay, move on. Move over.
This is the treatment I get all the time.
I apologise, everyone, and this is kind of embarrassing, to be honest. Great intro and all of that sort of thing, but look, to be honest, when I knew I was coming out to do this, I actually did a bit of a deep dive into evolution, and to be honest, there's a compelling argument. There is a compelling argument that I found it on Google, and it's a simple paragraph that explains evolution, and I actually want to read it out to everyone now because I think once I've read it out to you, you're going to have trouble trying to work out whether evolution is actually just a theory. So I found this on an evolution site that just basically explained it in simple terms what evolution is. So I'll read it out and you can make your own mind up. So here it is. Evolution is the act of white smoke hydrothermal vents that around 4 billion years ago were an energetic disequilibrium provided by proton gradients that swelled in and out of porous, serpentinized olivine submarine rock that created the perfect atmosphere that sparked the start of living organisms and molecules that over billions of years created the rise of biodiversity at every level of biological organisation, including the levels of species that have evolved through the genetic variation into this world that we live in now. That's it. That's all I've got to say.
We can all go home now. We've all been convinced of evolution with that comment. But I think that's actually a true comment. That's what, if you want to have a look at the so-called, intelligence of this world in giving you an explanation of evolution, that's what they'll give you. It's just crazy. We're going to give you a far simpler thing to understand and believe in than evolution. So the thing is, the question we have to ask is, does God exist? That's the underlying question of this whole subject about evolution. Does God exist? Well, if he does exist, then we've got to believe the statement that's about to come on the screen. The statement is this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if we believe in God, then we've got to believe that statement there. that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we ask the question again, does God exist? And if he does not exist, then we have to believe this statement on the screen. There's only two alternatives. In the beginning, there was nothing, which exploded and created everything. So there's your two. That's the only two options we have. You either believe in a divine creator that created everything, or you believe that in the beginning there was nothing and it exploded and created everything is now here because of that explosion. And that's really what evolution will want you to believe, but we're going to try and show you tonight that that is an unproven theory. Now, I've got in my hands here two dice. I'm going to use these little dice here to try and get a point across about the mathematical possibility of whether evolution is right or wrong. Now, this has nothing to do with us as Christadelphian Bible students. I didn't make all this up. This is actual mathematicians who have done a study on the probabilities of evolution actually occurring, and they've used a set of dice to do it. So I'm going to ask a question. If I throw one, I've got two dice here, but if I throw one dice on the table here, what's the chances I'm going to get a 6? 1 in 6, correct? One. Let's have a go. Well, I'll just do it here. I got 1. All right? So I didn't get it. If I try to throw that 6 times, it doesn't mean I'm going to get a 6, does it? But I've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting a 6. If I throw 2 dices, what's the chances of getting 2 6s? Come on, where's the mathematic geniuses? What's the chances of getting 2 6s? You reckon you know?
1 in 12.
Not quite, but that's a good guess. Very good guess. Anyone else? Alexa, I can hear you sort of saying something there, whispering to the boys. Don't be frightened to yell it out. There's no wrong answers. 1 in 36. 1 in 36. 6 times 6. Now, you wouldn't believe this. I've done this talk before, and I actually had it in my hands, and I went like that, and I got 2 6s. Seriously, I didn't get them this time. So the chances of getting 2 6s in a row with 2 dice is 1 in 36 times. What's the chances, if I had 3 dice, of getting 3 6s? I can see the minds ticking over. Someone said something then. Pretty good. 1 in 216 times of getting 3 6s. If I had 4 dices and I want to get 4 6s, the chances are 1 in 2,196 times. Now, you see the point I'm trying to make. The greater chance or the greater number of 6s being thrown with the dices is always going to be greater as you increase the number of times you want to throw. Well, here you go. This is the mathematician's chances of getting evolution to have evolved into what we know today as just the planet Earth, not the creation on it. So the chances, by the way, of rolling a dice and getting 76s in a row, so if I threw that, what's the chances of getting 76s in a row? So I throw one, oh yes, I've got a 6. I throw it again, I'm going to get, the chances of getting that is going to be 1 in 36 times. Throw it again, the chance of getting 3 6s in a row is 1 in every 216 times. What's the chances, you reckon, of getting 76s in a row? I don't expect you to know that, but I'll give you the answer. It's 10 to the 55th power. Well, there they are in noughts up there. That's the chances of getting 76s in a row. Now, why do we pick the number 70? Well, that comes to that figure of 10 to the 55th power, and mathematicians have actually scientifically worked out with the aid of mathematics, that the chances of the Big Bang Theory of establishing the planets in the order that they are, particularly planet Earth, the exact distance from the sun, the chances of that happening are 10 to the 55th power. That's what they tell us. Mathematics worked out the probability of the Big Bang Theory allowing a planet to be the right position from the heat source, to be in the right angle, rotating at the right speed and be able to sustain life is 1 in the 1055th of the power. So what the evolutionists will tell you is that there was a great big massive bang at some stage in the ancient history, billions of years ago, and it shot out matter all throughout the universe, and that Earth just happened to plonk itself the right distance from the sun, right on the right angle of rotation, right at the same amount, certain speed rotating to give us the right gravitation for life to be sustained on this planet, and also happen to throw in there, just for, you know, the whole idea of allowing life on Earth to be sustained, the moon that had to travel around the Earth at a certain speed, at a certain angle, at a certain distance to control the tides and the oceans on the Earth to give us life, because you've had no moon, you've got no life on the Earth, because the oceans wouldn't sustain life because the moon does all the tides. The chances of just that happening, nothing to do with creation on Earth, just that happening is 1 chance to 10 to the 55th power. That's just to get the planet in the right position to sustain life. Now the question is, how long would it take to throw 76s in a row? Now I don't know how mathematicians do this, but they actually have so many different equations they can throw at that statement that they've actually worked out how long it would take to throw 76s in a row. I don't know how they do it, but here's the answer. To throw 76s in a row would take that many years. I'm not even going to try and tell you how many years that is. That's just to get that 76s in a row, because you might be lucky and throw 5 sixes in a row, and then the 6th one you've got to start again. You might get to 68 sixes in a row and you only got 2 more to go, and you do it again, you've got to start right back at the beginning. That's how long they're saying is the mathematical chances or length of time you need to have to throw that 76s in a row. So what is the mathematician telling us about the chances of these planets all lining up where life, and by the way, we've put telescopes out there now, we've got the JW telescope, not the Jehovah's Witness telescope, the James Webb telescope now that's out there. It's even far better than the Hubble. They've never found another blue planet. Blue planet meaning a planet with life on it, with water. They haven't found it, and they've searched far and beyond what any other telescope has ever done in mankind's history. But lo and behold, we happen to have the 3rd planet from the sun, the blue planet, the only one that we know of in our solar system that sustains life, and the chances of that happening by a random explosion, so remote. So the evolution says it just all happened by a random explosion, and we all just happen to be on this planet that can sustain life. By the way, this mathematical equation's got nothing to do with life itself on the planet, just putting the planet in the position to be able to have life on it. Whereas the Bible simply says this: God created the heavens and he stretched them out. He created the earth and everything in it. He gives breath to everyone, life to everyone who walks the earth. I don't know, people say it takes blind faith to believe that. I tell you what, it's much easier for me to believe that than it is to believe the other section of random explosion with, hey, presto, we've got a planet sitting in the right position. So I thought I'd just run that past you first, just so we get a bit of an understanding, if you like, of the probabilities of us just happening to be inhabiting a planet that just randomly came about. It's not true. Now, I've got a little picture of Darren when he was a little bit younger, not too much long ago, but Darren's now going to take up part 2 of our little chat.
All right, here we go with our changeover. Hopefully this all works as it's supposed to. Okay, Thank you very much for having me here. It's actually really good to be here. I used to be part of Cumberland when I was younger, and
Sorry about that, by the way. I didn't really have much to do with that.
and in fact, I used to come to these Tuesday night classes as a teenager, and I haven't been for many, many years, but last time I did come, well, for quite a few years, it was held in that back hall, and there was maybe 5 rows of people there each week. And so now I miss a few years and turn up, and we got 80, 90 people here, so it's really, really good to see. So yes, thank you very much for having me, and I'm just going to continue on with, I'm actually going to throw a little spanner in the works because first of all, question, how long do we say that creation happened? How long ago do we say that that happened as Bible students? Does anyone know? How many years? 6,000, correct. 6,000 years ago. So maybe a question for the little kids down the front here. What's the scariest animal you know? What's a scary animal? A shark? Absolutely. Now what about the scariest extinct animal? Dinosaur. That's exactly right. So, my little spanner in the works is, how do we explain that dinosaurs are millions of years old when we say that creation is only 6,000 years old? How do we explain that? Were these animals on the ark? I don't think they were, because otherwise we'd have them around us now. So how can this be with a 6,000-year-old creation? And so what we're going to do is we're just going to have a quick look at Genesis chapter 1. So I'll just read Genesis chapter 1. You can just have a look at it on there. You don't have to open it up. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." So it describes here that the earth was without form and void. So my thoughts were that there's no way God would create an earth that was in this situation. So how do we explain that he created something that had no form, no void, and was covered in darkness? Well, the truth is that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and between Genesis 1 verse 1 and verse 2, we actually don't know how far between those two verses the time period that happened. So it's actually possibly millions of years that were between verse 1 and 2. Now I'll tell you the reasoning why is because, see, I've highlighted that word "was" there. I remember sitting down in talks and people telling me Hebrew words and the big long Hebrew words, and this is what it meant, so I don't want to go and do that. However, the Hebrew word for that word "was" is "became." All right? It's the word "became." So it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Awesome. Now the earth became formless and empty. So that's the best translation to have for that verse there. Now, the cause of what happened between those two verses, we're not told, we don't know, but perhaps it explains that there was a previous creation, and maybe that's where the dinosaurs came from, because it would explain the fossils that are found in rocks and the skeletons that we see of those dinosaurs in museums. The other question is, where did the angels come from? A previous creation, maybe. So whatever happened between those two verses, we don't know, and because the Bible doesn't tell us, it doesn't really matter, but it does give us that logical reason as to where dinosaurs and things like that come from, that scientists claim are millions of years old. So that's my little fixing the spanner in the works of the dinosaurs and things that are millions of years old. So I found this picture of you.
I was much younger then, so. Now, let me see if this works. Thanks, Darren. Yeah, that is always a good point. I can remember being a young person too. I was wondering whether maybe there were dinosaurs on the ark or whatever, but it does seem to make sense that perhaps we did have a pre-creation to Adam and Eve, and then everything went pear-shaped for whatever reason, and as a result of that, we ended up with a new creation starting 6,000 years ago with Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. All right, I'm going to be very quick with this because you've all heard of the missing link. They still teach that today. You've heard of that terminology, the missing link. So what happens is we, as a human race, according to the evolutionists, started developing into what we are now as from a chimpanzee, and here we are as the human beings. So what they are saying is, well, in between the chimp and mankind as we know it today, us today, there is some form of a missing link or missing links. Now they've claimed from time to time to have found these missing links. And every time they've made this claim, it's made world headlines, missing link found in, the jungles of Amazon or somewhere else. They've done an absolute study on the skeletal remains, only to find they're like 500 years old, of a tribal member of the local tribe and whatever. So nobody has ever found the missing link. So the missing link is still missing. There is no evidence ever found between the chimpanzee and the human being. Can't find any. It's not there. Totally missing. So therefore they have to come up with some other contrived idea that, well, we still must have come from the apes because the monkey and the human being have got a lot of things in common. I would say that, when you look at certain people, that you would say that could be the case. And so they try to say that we've got this sort of an appearance of the ape, so therefore we must have come from the ape, and we've developed in. It's a bit amazing, isn't it, that we've still got chimpanzees that haven't evolved into anything further than chimpanzees. We've got human beings that are born every day. There's nothing in between to suggest that there is any connection whatsoever between the two species. But they will try and say, well, we sort of come from the monkey. We seem to have this sort of an appearance of a monkey. Well, I would say, did we evolve from dogs? Because I tell you what, I've seen some owners who've got dogs, and they look like they're dogs. I mean, I could put this up here, and you would have to say that each one of those evolved from a dog, because there's some connection there between them and their little precious pets. And this one is, I think, probably one of the best. Did we evolve from dogs? Well, you be the judge. You be the judge. Now, I know I'm throwing that out there, and it might sound very humorous, but the whole concept of accepting evolution just based on the fact that we seem to have these facial sort of expressions and features of the monkey just doesn't wash with me. Does anyone know who was the author, if you like, of the theory of evolution? Yep, Charles Darwin. Well done. Charles Darwin was around about the mid-1800s, he decided that he wanted to explore a little bit more into the knowledge, and he wrote the book, The Origin of the Species, to promote the theory of evolution. And it grabbed people's attention, and it gained quite a bit of momentum to the point today that it is taken no longer as a theory, as I said at the beginning, it's taken as almost a fact, and it's never been proven, never has. Did you know that Charles Darwin, who was the promoter of the theory of evolution right from the word beginning, he had absolute doubts about his own theory? And there was one thing he could not get over as far as this whole idea of us evolving from a piece of slime. This is where it all apparently started. There was a little bit of a slime somewhere bacterial slime somewhere sitting in a pond, and lightning struck it, and hence, presto, here we are today. That's what evolution would want you to believe. Give it a lot of time, and you're going to end up like this because we all started from a piece of floating bacterial slime in a pond somewhere. By the way, I spoke to an evolutionist not all that long ago who's a very, very staunch believer in evolution. And he said, no, I definitely really believe we started from a microscopic piece of bacteria in the ponds, so the water on this planet, and somehow got a little electric charge from perhaps a lightning bolt, and that's where it all started. And, you just give it a few million years, and presto, you got fish, and they start walking, and now we're human beings. That's what he would tell you to believe. And he said, but I do have this confession to make. He said, I don't know where the bacteria started. He said, I don't know where because that's a living entity. It's a living organism. I don't know where that bacteria came from. So even himself, he had trouble. But Charles Darwin, he had trouble. He said, to this day, the eye to this day gives me a cold shudder to think that the eye had evolved by natural selection. It seems, he says, I freely confess, to be absurd in the highest possible degree. And I think Darren's going to say a little bit about that in a moment. So he actually had doubts about his theory, and what he's really saying is, you know what, behind the scenes, I'm pretty certain that it's quite a ridiculous theory. I don't think he realised just how many people would gravitate to this theory and accept it. One reason, by the way, why people gravitate to the theory of evolution, because it does God out of the picture. They have no more responsibility anymore. They don't have to live up to the standard that God wants mankind to live up to. Let's push God right out of the picture. Let's take hold of this, because guess what? No more worrying about God in our lives. And that is what mankind has done. Did God use evolution to create mankind? That's another theory that gets promoted. Theistic evolution. Well, that's totally wrong as well. And just one quote out of Scripture that shows that is that God said in Genesis chapter 2, after creation had been done in 6 days, and he had multitude and multitude, tens and tens of thousands of angels to help creation. It wasn't just done, on a whim with a click of the fingers. These angels were involved in every part of creation. That's why it took the 6 days. But it says that the heavens and the earth and all the host of them, all the creatures that were created on the earth were finished. They were finished in those 6 days. And that word finished in the actual Hebrew means to be fully completed. They didn't take a long period of time like the theistic evolutionists would tell us that God used evolution to create mankind. No, God says they were completely finished in 6 days, not 600 million years. All right? Apostle Paul warned us about the theory of evolution when he said in Romans verses 1 to 20 to 21, he says, this is what people would believe. He said, this will come, mark my words. And this man spoke 2,000 years ago. He said, mark my words. He says that the people will come who change the truth. They'll change the truth of God into a lie. And worship, and they will serve the creature more than the creator. So the evolutionists so much invested their time in trying to prove the monkeys and the creatures and all those things all evolved from this little microbe. They've forgotten the big picture, which is the true creator that created everything. And Paul warned us about that. So then, if we, and this is where I'm going to leave you and Darren's going to finish off, if we can't prove evolution, then what's next to believe? If you can't prove evolution, then you want to have some satisfaction in your mind that we have to have an answer as to how we got here and who we are and what our identity is and what our role is, then we really have to turn to God. God's the only explanation. Psalm says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Well, I don't want to be a fool. Do you want to be a fool? None of us want to be foolish and say that. Plenty of people do. We want to look closely at the alternative, and there are so many different ways in which we can prove that God exists, not just by creation. All right, we can prove it by archaeology. We can actually use science to prove God exists. We can use Bible prophecy, which I think is one of the greatest ways to prove that God exists. And he is alive, he is well, he has a plan and a purpose with this earth. So that's me done. Darren's now going to hop up here. This was a couple of days after you were born, Darren, so you can finish off the evening.
Worked every time when we tried it last time. Okay, who's the guru that can pull it out? You're a champion, Josh. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on. It's 7:20 at 8, so we'll fly through this next section because no one wants a late night. So I'm going to look at actually some of God's creation, well, what we believe is God's creation, and how I'm only going to look at a couple of animals and just show that there's certain things that needed to happen at the same time and couldn't have happened over long periods of time. So the first animal is just the giraffe. The giraffe requires this special blood pump to actually pump the blood up through the neck. Because it's so long, it needs that special pump to be able to pump it up so far to get up to its brain. So how would evolution work in that sort of example? Because first of all, the giraffe needs the special pump to pump that blood, but it also needs the long neck to be able to get the food that it eats up in the trees. So one couldn't happen without the other. So when you try and compare that with evolution, that, did that happen all at the same time, or how does that survival of the fittest fit in with what came first? Because if the long neck came first, it'd die because the blood can't get there. If the pump come first, well, I don't even know what happens if the pump comes first, but anyway, the other animal is the bee. And I don't know, I'm sure some of you have heard talks about bees before. I didn't actually realise how important bees are to this planet until you start looking into it. But they've got 5 eyes, they've got 6 legs, and they make honey, as we know, and they also do the pollination. So pollination is when a bee collects nectar and pollen from one plant and puts it into another and feeds that plant and transfers it to another plant. And I'm not entirely scientific with how it all works, but what I do know is that if bees suddenly became extinct on our planet, then the world would not be able to support the current population that we have, and millions of people would die, because without bees, we would lose our fruit trees, we'd lose our crops, we'd lose our flowers, we'd lose our vegetables, farmers would go out of business, there'd be no more Woolies and Coles that you can buy your food from. That's how important bees are. So it would totally throw the world into complete chaos. So how does that work with evolution? What came first? The plants, the vegetables, the trees, or the bees? Or was it a divine creation that had to have been done at the same time? You can't have one without the other. And so it really puts a bit of a dampener on the theory of evolution. Now, as Dad mentioned, he spoke about the eye. David writes in Psalm, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." The human eye is quite amazing. It possesses 130 million light-sensitive rods that converts light into chemical impulses that travel into our brain and tell us what we're looking at. So how does that happen by chance? Like, really? So the problem for evolutionists is all these little intricate pieces in our body, and particularly in our eye, how do they work perfectly together if they've had to evolve over a long period of time, because you can't have one thing without the other. There's a famous author and journalist wrote about the eye. It's quite evident that the slightest thing goes wrong with the eye. If the cornea is fuzzy, the pupil fails to dilate, the lens becomes opaque, or focusing goes wrong, then our recognisable image is not formed. So the eye either functions as a whole or not at all. So how did it come to evolve? By slow, steady, infinite, small evolution-style improvements. Is it really possible that thousands upon thousands of lucky chance mutations happened coincidentally, so that the lens and the retina, which cannot work without each other, evolved all at the same time? So what value is there in an eye that can't see? And even, you mentioned Charles Darwin, they actually found a letter that he'd written to a friend, and this letter said, "To this day the eye makes me shudder. Incredible as the eye is, consider that we don't just have one of them, but we've got two of them. This matched pair, coupled with our interpretive centre, the brain, allows us to determine distances to objects. We have the ability to focus automatically by elongating or compressing our eyeballs. They're also inset beneath a bony brow that protects our eyes, along with automatic shutters in the form of eyelids." And so he could not explain how that could have happened by chance, because one couldn't happen first before the other. So maybe Darwin should have looked closer at the Bible to see what the Bible says, because we know it says, "The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord have made them both." And that was written by King Solomon, the wisest man in the world and in the Bible, in Proverbs chapter 20. So, realistically, it does make you start to question how evolution does work. So the other thing that Dad mentioned was our solar system and where we sit in the solar system and things like that, and the chances of us being in exactly the right spot for everything to just work. If anything was out of kilter, then we wouldn't survive. So I've actually got a quick video to show. I might just exit out, see if I can get some music to work. Just bear with me. That should work. I'll try this. I don't know if the sound will work, but basically this is talking about the eye and the solar system. So this is just a comparison with how big our solar system is and what God has created, and then also how our eyes have been formed. So let's see if this works. Trying to get some sound to work, but it's not. But if you just have a look at that, and it's telling you how far we're zooming out. So it actually just shows you how small Earth is. Can you hear it? So there's our solar system. Now let's check out the eye now. There you go. I hope you found that enjoyable. It's just a big zoom out and then a big zoom back in, and you can just see how intricate and amazing our planet is, and how we've actually been made. I just want to compare it to a watch, if you like. Can I have a volunteer? Has anyone got a watch that I could just borrow off them for a second? Josh? I'll use your watch, Josh. I know you're different. Rolex. What have we got? Guess watch. Nice. Okay, so just to give you an example, I've got this bag here. I'm just going to drop the watch in the bag. What we'll do is, I'm just up here. Sorry, Josh, but it's okay. It's okay, because what we'll do, Josh, is I've got a jar, and I'll just tip all the pieces of the watch into there. All right, there's quite a few bits in there, and what we can do is if we just keep doing that for the next 100,000 million years, it'll put itself back together, mate, and you can have it back. So I'll give you that later, but no, thanks for the watch anyway. That's the absurdity of it, okay? That's what evolution is. Keep shaking that and it's eventually going to find its way back together. We know it's not going to happen. Just like the watch, you take one little cog out of a watch and it's not going to tell the time. It's going to be inaccurate, it won't work. It had to have had a maker, okay? You had to have a specialised watchmaker to be able to put every little piece together all at the same time for it to do what it's supposed to do. It wasn't just by chance. And, I mean, we haven't even looked at our brain. Our brain is the most powerful, complex, amazing thing that's been given to us, and it's more powerful than any computer in the world. And even to this day, you know, the top doctors and scientists and all that don't quite understand how our brain works. How can you say that was all done from a big bang? It just sounds silly even saying it. It was all done by a divine creator. So, Genesis chapter 1 verse 31, and God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. Let's not overcomplicate creation. Let's not try and find the alternative. Let's not look at evolution just because we don't want to have the responsibility of believing in a God. Humans have messed up this world in a big way, and you know, we've got this powerful being that did create us, that did make everything, and he also has a very special plan and purpose for all of us, and it can involve every single one of us. So that does bring our night to an end, and just a quote to end the night, John 17 verse 3, and this is eternal life, that they may know that You are the one true God and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. And that's a good quote that's, I think, going to lead into next week. There's next week, Dave Finnan is doing next week, which I think is going to be pretty exciting. You've probably got this in your. So what was next week? Hope in the Bible, or our hope, something like that. It's all to do with our hope. So don't lose hope. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy your night.